Hey there and welcome back to NBA 2K17. My name is Pete and today we complete the first year of NBA 2K17's MyGM mode with the Los Angeles Lakers. Now, even though the years of Kobe Bryant are over in LA, the Lakers still remain one of the most popular franchises in the world. The team is clearly in rebuild mode but has already acquired a few promising talents. Our job as GM is now to add to a young core and take the team to the next level. Quick note on the side here, because I made this video after the 2017 trade deadline, that means Lou Williams and Marcelo Huertas are no longer with the team. However, the newly acquired Corey Brewer as well as Tyler Ennis and the Rockets' 2017 first-round draft pick are. Now let's have a look at the situation in LA and let's get things started with the backcourt. Here, D'Angelo Russell should be set as the starter with either Nick Young or Jordan Clarkson at the other guard spot. Depending on where you put Young, either him, Wallbang or Brandon Ingram can start at the small forward, and you can already see that the Lakers lack a real superstar here, but they make up for that in versatility. Moving down low, Julius Randle is probably the safest bet as the starter at the power forward, but you could also move him to the center in a small ball lineup. Who starts next to him is entirely up to you. There are a lot of options available and either Black, Moskov or even 19-year-old Zubac are good choices. The game defaults you to a lineup of Russell, Young, Ingram, Randle and Black, but like I said, feel free to play around with that and go with the squad you like best. Now, with the starters being all but set in stone, the bench looks very similar. For lack of better alternatives, Jordan Clarkson should back up the point guard spot, while Tyler Ennis still needs a few years to develop. If Nick Young starts as the shooting guard, then Clarkson could see heavy minutes as a backup here as well, because otherwise you would either have to bring David Nwaba or Corey Brewer in, and compared to them, Clarkson is clearly the better option. A rotation where one of Russell and Young is always on the court, with Clarkson filling in, makes sense, but can be a very risky approach as well. At the small forward, you really only have the choice between Deng and Ingram. If Ingram starts, Deng will come off the bench, and vice versa. I would personally not give minutes to Brewer or Metta World Peace, simply because you can do better. Down low, Larry Nance seems designated as the backup power forward, but Thomas Robinson makes a strong case as well. Robinson could also back up the center spot, however, with Black, Moskov and Zubac, you have a bunch of players here who will all sooner or later demand minutes. Again, play around and see who you like best, there is no wrong or right rotation here. A quick look at who has an expiring contract might make the decision regarding the rotation a bit easier though, because why feature someone heavily who might be gone in a year? However, the only true rotation player on an expiring deal is Thomas Robinson. Both Metta World Peace and David Nwaba will probably not be in your rotation to begin with. Now, there is a player option coming up on Nick Young, and those are always a bit risky, but in my experience he is likely to stay with the team for one more year. If you're feeling less confident about that, you might want to test the trade waters with him. You also have a bunch of team options coming up, but those are mostly no-brainers. Of Russell, Randle, Nance, Black and Ennis, only Black and Ennis are debatable. Ennis because he is simply not that good, and Black because he will likely be willing to sign for a much cheaper deal in free agency. Now, in return for trading away Lou Williams, the Lakers have acquired the Rockets' 2017 first-round draft pick. A good move, because otherwise they would not have one this year. Apart from that, the pick situation is solid. Only in 2019 they have no first-round pick, but there is still a lot of time to fix that. Rebuilding through the draft will likely be an important part of your strategy for a few more seasons, so draft picks should be handled with care. Cap space-wise, the Lakers have not much to worry about. Despite large contracts on role players like Deng and Moskov, the team still has almost $8 million left to spend. Next year that value will be at $37 million, of course not counting team and player options. If we think long-term, it is probably a good idea to get rid of Deng or Moskov, or both once the youngsters come off their rookie deals, otherwise you might not be able to pay all of them. And that brings us straight to the first of the three key questions. Question number 1. How long do you want to live with the contracts of Moskov and Deng? Both of them get paid a very large sum for the next 4 years, and by the end of their contracts, both are well within their mid-30s. Especially in the case of Moskov, we have a lot of people that will thankfully take his minutes in the rotation, while Deng is likely still a bit more important, at least for the moment. Question number 2. Do you part ways with Nick Young or hope he sticks around? Nick Young is a 31-year-old player with a mid-70s rating who has a $5.7 million player option coming up. All in all, that does sound like someone who is expendable. However, keep in mind that the Lakers' guard rotation is very thin at the moment, and Young plays an essential role for the team. His player option is something to think about, but then again there is always free agency. All in all, Young is definitely a case worth discussing when you start thinking about potential trades. And question number 3, do you see the young guys as long-term options? Now, this question most of all targets Brandon Ingram, but can be applied to Zubats, Randle, and even to some extent to Russell as well. While they are still young, none of them has superstar written all over them. Russell is probably a safe bet to be the leader of the team for the future, but the other guys might not develop to the level where you need them to be to eventually win a championship. Keep in mind that in a rebuild, very few players are truly irreplaceable, especially if your draft class has a generational talent in store. With that being said, for the sake of realism in this video, I would still consider untradeable Russell, Randle and Clarkson, and maybe Nance as well, but that's more because he has an extremely cheap contract. Now, before we get into the moves, a quick reminder that you can increase a few of your players' ratings quite significantly by assigning them positions that are better suited for them. The most obvious candidate is David Nwaba, who if changed to small forward will experience a rating boost of 4 points, but you can also increase the ratings of both Russell and Clarkson by 2 points by switching them to shooting guard, which of course would leave you with a nice hole at the point guard. Larry Nance also seems to feel more comfortable at the small forward as his rating increases by 2 points if he's put here, and Tarek Black can be changed to power forward for another 2-point boost. I would personally switch Nwaba because why not, then Black because he's severely undersized for the center anyway, and then maybe Nance as well because that gives you another reason to get rid of Wallbang's huge contract. And now let's get into it. Here are your 3 moves to make in NBA 2K17's MyGM or MyLeague mode with the Los Angeles Lakers. And move number 1, it's the obvious one, trade Timofey Mozgov. His contract is simply put an atrocity, there is no desperate need for him in your rotation, he is one of the older players on the team, and probably most importantly, there is really not a whole lot that he is good at least in 2K. While his mid-range shot is money, his post-scoring and rebounding skills leave a lot to be desired for a 7'1" big man. The only trouble will be finding a suitable trade partner because, surprise surprise, there are not a lot of teams who can afford adding a $64 million contract. Of course, we don't want to add an equally bad contract in return, so the trade targets are somewhat limited. Ideally, we're looking at a guard in return, but a solid role player, a pick, an expiring contract, or any combination of the aforementioned work just as well. A potential match would be this trade, Mozgov and World Peace for the expiring deals of Jerebko and Zeller from Boston. Zeller has a team option coming up that we could decline, and we would free up a ton of cap space after the season to maybe add our first big-name free agent who can help accelerate the rebuilding process. The Brooklyn Nets have a lot of cap space left, so Mozgov and Nwaba can be sent over there in exchange for Hamilton and Harris, and while Hamilton will be under contract for 2 years, his $3 million per year salary won't hurt as much. The Nuggets also have a bit of cash to spare, so a straight-up exchange of Mozgov for the expiring former Laker Roy Hibbert does the trick just as well as any of the previous trades. In the end, it's also the trade I went with, simply because it's nice and easy and we bring back Hibbert in a Laker uniform. Where you put him in the rotation is your decision, everything from starter to end of the bench player is possible. And now move number 2, it's the second obvious one, trade Wallbang. Now I say this with the suggestion of changing Larry Nance to small forward in mind. Making that change immediately makes Nance the second best player on the team, and more importantly, it makes Wallbang and his $72 million contract more or less obsolete. Apart from that, a lot of the reasons for dealing Mozgov apply here as well, and Bang is even older than Mozgov. Again, getting a guard here would be nice, but getting the contract off the books is the main concern, just like before. You will likely see a lot of the offers you already saw for Mozgov, so once again, if you made no deals with them before, the Nets and Nuggets, but also the Sixers, Jazz and Suns are interesting trade partners. From the Nets, you might get one of their young guards, so either Dinwiddie, Whitehead, Kilpatrick or LeVert are players you should have a look at. The Sixers don't have that large a talent pool at the guard spots, but a few expiring contracts can be found nonetheless. Utah also has a good amount of salary cap left, but to make things work you will have to take on a contract that is worth at least $4.5 million, and there are not a lot of players on that team who fit that description. Getting 34-year-old Boris Diaw and his expiring contract is an option, but you might be able to do better. Another team with cap space is Phoenix, who don't have much to offer when it comes to role-player caliber guards, but Tyler Ulis is worth a look, and they also have a few expiring contracts that you can work with. I actually went with Wallbang and 2 second-rounders for Ulis because I have used Ulis quite a lot in my own personal MyGM playthrough, and I like his skill set, especially his speed in passing. With Ulis we could now theoretically afford to make Clarkson a full-time shooting guard, and we could also have a look at offers for Tyler Ennis, who has now drifted even further to the back of the rotation. And of course, please remember you might want to go in another direction with this trade, especially considering the price I paid here, and that is of course absolutely fine. In the end, you should simply try and have Thang off the books. And move number 3, the beginning of the off-season, however excluding free agency. Now, first of all, Meta World Peace will likely retire, so that is one player less on the roster. With the Rockets pick, you will likely pick in the mid to late first rounds, so don't get your hopes up too much about landing a franchise player in the draft. Still, another young talent never hurts. Now, options. Nick Young is likely to accept his player option, otherwise he or a player at his position become a target in free agency. The team options of Russell, Nance and Randall should be absolutely taken, while I would personally decline both Black and Ennis for the reasons I already mentioned earlier. In free agency, your main concern will now be to either strategically fill the holes on the roster or to go all out and use your $50 million in cap space to grab a few big names and make the Lakers the kings of LA again. I will leave this last bit up to you. With that much money you should have a lot of options and you can steer your team in many different directions. So that's it from my part. Those were 3 ideas for moves to make as the Los Angeles Lakers in NBA 2K17's MyGM or MyLeague mode. Let me know in the comments below how you would handle the Lakers. As always, leave a thumbs up if you like this video, or if you want to support the channel, then click on subscribe. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.